Welcome to our channel. We present you a video that is a detailed summary and main conclusions of the book, Art of Being Happy. Author, Arthur Schopenhauer.
Eudaimonology, or the Art of Being Happy, explained in 50 Rules for Life Die Kunst, Glücklich zu sein oder Eudaimonology, in the original German, is the title of a series of articles written by the German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, 1788 to 1860, compiled and subsequently published. Unlike The Art of Being Right, which already appears in manuscript form as a small finished work, The Art of Being Happy was never completed and remained in its most basic form, 50 Rules for Life, that were written at various times and are scattered throughout the different volumes and folders of the German philosopher. It is surprising that 140 years after Schopenhauer's death, there are still unpublished texts of his work and of such value that those painstakingly and almost detective-like, reconstructed by the philosophy professor Franco Volpi, or a small manual of practical philosophy, The Art of Being Happy. It is a true gem hidden in the philosopher's legacy, in which we are invited to educate our character through rules of conduct that help us avoid the hardships and blows of fate. From a very young age, Schopenhauer had a predilection for the literary genre of small treatises of practical philosophy. Even during the time he resided in Berlin, he liked to write brief texts and notes for his personal use. Thus was born, for example, The Art of Being Right-aristic, posthumously published from his legacy. In conclusion, The Art of Being Happy is a masterpiece that offers valuable advice on how to face the challenges of life. Summary of the key points from the book. Pessimistic Happiness. Schopenhauer's L'Art des Feliz offers 50 rules for a happy life, grounded in a pessimistic view of existence. Human aspiration. The text discusses the human pursuit of happiness and the harsh realities of life that often contradict our hopeful aspiration. Envy and contentment. It warns against envy and encourages contentment with one's present circumstances, emphasizing the importance of recognizing and accepting one's individual limitations. Illusions of joy. The work advises against chasing illusory joys, suggesting that true happiness comes from appreciating a peaceful and bearable present without constant longing for imagined pleasures. These points reflect Schopenhauer's philosophy that happiness can be achieved through wisdom and understanding of the human condition, despite life's inherent challenge. Below I summarize the 50 rules. Rule number 1. The text expresses the idea that we are all born with aspiration for happiness and pleasure, but soon realize that destiny has absolute control over our lives, even our physical possessions. As we experience pain and suffering, we learn to value the absence of pain more than the constant pursuit of pleasure. The wisdom of seeking a tranquil and bearable present is highlighted over obsessing about the pursuit of future joys or worrying about an uncertain future. The importance of enjoying the present moment is emphasized, as life is simply a succession of passing moments. Rule number 2 addresses the topic of envy and how we should avoid it. Seneca is quoted to emphasize that we will never be happy if we torment ourselves over others being happier than us. It is also mentioned that when comparing ourselves to those ahead of us, we should remember how many are behind us. The rule underscores the relentless and cruel nature of envy, despite often striving to evoke it in others. Rule number 3 deals with acquired character, which is different from intelligible and empirical character. This type of character develops throughout life through experience and reflection in the world. Although empirical character, as a manifestation of intelligible character, might seem unchangeable, it is actually necessary to acquire character through experience and understanding of oneself. Acquired character involves a complete knowledge of one's individuality, including capabilities and deficiencies, allowing for a more conscious role in life. Through a clear understanding of oneself, one can act more deliberately and avoid falling into impulsive decisions or actions contrary to one's nature. In summary, acquired character is the result of a deep knowledge of one's individuality and capabilities, enabling wiser action and avoiding suffering caused by self-ignorance. Rule number 4 addresses the relationship between aspiration and possessions. It highlights that people are happy or unhappy according to their aspiration and perception of their possessions in relation to those. Aspiration. Each individual has their own horizon of what they consider possible to achieve, and their aspiration are limited to this horizon. If a person believes they can obtain an object within their reach, they will feel happy, but if difficulties arise preventing them from obtaining it, they will feel unhappy. The source of human discontent lies in the continual attempts to raise the level of aspiration, while the immobility of possessions prevents achieving that goal. Rule number 5 discusses natural and individual measure of pain, as well as the relationship between suffering and anticipation of the future. It suggests that each individual has a definitive measure of pain that is characteristic to them, which cannot be left empty or filled too much, regardless of the form. Suffering takes. Both suffering and well-being are argued to be determined not by external circumstances, such as wealth or social class, but by an inner disposition. The excess of joy and pain are based on illusions that quickly fade once achieved, and could be avoided through wisdom, an acceptance that suffering is essential to life. Rule number 6 establishes principle of acting with good will within our capabilities and being willing to endure inevitable suffering. The quote, Zmen Garauk, Sloman, Alls Dunomitha, translated as we must live not as we want, but as we can, emphasizes adapting to circumstances and accepting the limitations life imposes. This principle implies that we cannot always pursue our desires or aspiration exactly as we want in life. Instead, we must act with goodwill within our capabilities and be prepared to face challenges and suffering that may inevitably arise. Rule number 7. This rule emphasizes the importance of deeply reflecting on an action before undertaking it. However, once the decision has been made and the results are awaited, one should not distress oneself with repeated concerns about possible dangers. Instead, it is advised to completely detach from the matter, close the drawer of thought on it, and reassure oneself with the conviction that it has been thoroughly considered. If the outcome is negative, it is attributed to the random and error-prone nature of all things. Rule number 8 advocates for limiting one's scope of action as a way to reduce exposure to misfortune. It suggests that by limiting our aspiration and expectations, we can find greater happiness. Rule number 9, quoting Aristotle, this rule establishes that the prudent individual does not seek pleasure, but rather the absence of pain. It suggests that wisdom lies in seeking tranquility and avoiding suffering rather than pursuing fleeting pleasure. Rule number 10, this rule, attributed to Seneca, urges one to submit to reason if one desires to have control over all things. It implies that wisdom and control come from aligning oneself with reason and logic rather than being swayed by irrational emotions or desires. Rule number 11. Itus advised not to allow oneself to lament a past misfortune that cannot be remedied. It is compared to the case of King David and the captured elephants, suggesting that dwelling on what could have been only causes further suffering. Instead, accepting the situation and learning from it makes us wiser for the future. Rule number 12, on trust. This rule refers to the importance of being cautious about whom we share our thoughts and secrets with. It warns against the seduction of dialogue and people's tendency to reveal what they have heard, even after promising to keep silent. The need to be reserved and discreet in our Interactions with others is emphasized. Rule number 13. This rule emphasizes the importance of joy and the need to allow oneself to be joyful without questioning it too much. It argues that joy is a good in itself, and that concrete reasons are not necessary to experience it. Joy is compared to other possessions and circumstances, suggesting that even those who have wealth, youth, beauty, and fame may not be happy if they lack joy. It is encouraged to open all doors to joy when it arrives, as it never comes untimely. Rule number 14. This rule deals with the balance between living in the present and worrying about the future. It argues that exclusively living in the present or in the future can be detrimental, and it urges maintaining a proper balance between the two to avoid one ruining the other. Rule number 15. Here, it is argued that maintaining serenity in the face of life setbacks is a sign of wisdom. It is suggested that those who can remain calm in the face of challenges understand the diversity of possible adversities and see them as part of life. The phrase "all's well that ends well" is quoted to emphasize the importance of maintaining perspective. Rule number 16. Reflections on the nature of happiness and suffering are made, suggesting that the pursuit of happiness may be in vain, since pleasures are fleeting and pains are real. It is advised to focus on avoiding suffering rather than actively seeking happiness, arguing that the absence of pain is the true good. Rule number 17. Here, the nature of life and the perception of happiness and suffering are discussed. It is argued that life is not about seeking pleasures, as these are negative, but about avoiding pains. The importance of keeping attention on the objective and active aspect of life, rather than being carried away by fantasies and unrealistic expectations, is highlighted. Rule number 18. Warnings about the dangers of letting the imagination run wild, especially in relation to well-being and discomfort, are given. It is argued that fantasy can magnify fears and concerns, causing unnecessary distress. It is encouraged to exercise sober and cold judgment rather than letting the imagination take over the mind. Rule number 19. This rule emphasizes the importance of living the present joyfully and fully, as the future is uncertain and the past is immutable. It warns against the tendency to worry too much about the future or lament the past, as this can lead to neglecting the present, which is the only thing that is secure and real. Rule number 20. Here, it is argued that expressing anger or hatred verbally or facially is futile and inelegant. It is suggested that it is better to show these emotions through actions, and the importance of avoiding anger and hatred in the first place is emphasized. Rule number 21. The need to handle our thoughts and worries in a fragmented manner is addressed here, focusing on one issue at a time without allowing concerns to intertwine and overwhelm us. It is argued that this fragmentation helps us to stay calm and avoid letting worries dominate our lives. Rule number 22. This rule compares life to a dice game or a game of chess, arguing that our plans and actions are conditioned by external and unpredictable factors. It is suggested that we should be flexible and able to adapt to the unexpected changes that life presents us with. Rule number 23. Reflections on the pursuit of happiness and discontent at different stages of life are made here. It is argued that the constant pursuit of happiness can lead to disillusionment, and it is suggested that in the second half of life, the concern for avoiding suffering may be more satisfying than the pursuit of happiness. Rule number 24. Reflections on the nature of happiness and the value of possessions and experiences are made here. It is argued that we often underestimate what we have until we lose it, and it is suggested that we should appreciate and cherish what we have in the present instead of lamenting it when we no longer have it. Rule number 25. The importance of setting limits to our desires and emotions is addressed here, recognizing that Humans cannot have everything they desire, and that some evils are inevitable. It is argued that even with wealth and power, one can feel miserable if they do not learn to be content with what they have. Rule number 26. Emphasis is placed on the need to set goals for our desires, control our emotions, and accept the reality that we cannot have it all. Horace is quoted to reinforce the idea of seeking wisdom and moderation in life. Rule number 27. This rule suggests that we should pay more attention to those who are in worse conditions than us, instead of constantly comparing ourselves to those who seem to be better off. It is argued that observing the sufferings of others can help us find comfort in our own problems and appreciate what we have. Rule number 28. Here, the perception of old age is addressed, arguing that we should not pity the lack of certain pleasures in old age. It is suggested that satisfaction and comfort are the main needs in old age, and that pleasures can be replaced by other forms of satisfaction. Rule number 29. The teachings of Epicurus on the nature of desires and ambitions are cited here. A distinction is made between natural and necessary desires, natural but unnecessary desires, and desires arising from vain opinions. It is argued that true wealth lies in limiting our desires to what is natural and necessary. Rule number 30. This rule highlights the importance of activity and effort in the pursuit of happiness. It is argued that humans find satisfaction in putting their forces into action and achieving success in their endeavors. It is suggested that immobility can lead to unhappiness, and that it is necessary to strive and exert oneself to find true satisfaction in life. Rule number 31. Here, a warning is issued against basing our ambitions on fanciful images rather than solid concepts. It is argued that fanciful images can lead to disillusionment, while solid and reasoned concepts are more reliable as guides for our aspiration. Rule number 32. The importance of health for a human happiness is emphasized. It is argued that health is fundamental to good humor and the ability to enjoy life, and that nothing can substitute health in terms of happiness. Rule number 33. This rule addresses the influence of intuitive impressions on our lives and argues that we must learn to master these impressions to prevent them from disturbing our peace of mind and decision-making. Rule number 34. It is suggested that one way to avoid unhappiness is to moderate our expectations and desires, as excessive pursuit of happiness can lead to great misfortunes. It is argued that keeping our demands modest is the key to avoiding great disasters. Rule number 35. Here, it is noted that we often overlook the transformations that time brings upon us when making plans for our lives. It is argued that we must take into account how we change over time to avoid working towards goals that are no longer suitable for us. Rule number 36. It is argued that a surefire way to avoid unhappiness is not to desire to be happy. That is, to keep our expectations and demands at a moderate level. It is suggested that moderation in our aspiration is wise and protects us from disillusionment and suffering. Rule number 37. This rule maintains that suffering is more predominant and positive in life than pleasures, and that those who act according to reason often have to give up pleasures to avoid suffering. It is argued that reason can be perceived as a demanding mentor that requires renunciation, but offers a relatively suffering-free existence as a reward. Rule 38. Each individual lives in a unique world, influenced by their own perception and sensitivity. What matters are not the external events, but how we experience them internally. The importance of maintaining a cheerful and healthy mind over material possessions is emphasized. Rule 39. The need and causality in life are discussed, addressing concepts such as possibility, reality, and necessity. The notion of something being absolutely necessary is criticized, arguing that everything Real is necessary, but not everything necessary is real. Rule 40. It is advised not to create excessively optimistic expectations and to prepare for the worst, which can lead to fewer disappointments. It is mentioned that pessimistic people may suffer more in imagination, but less in reality. Rule 41. Advocates for accepting what has happened as inevitable, avoiding speculation on how it could have been different. Rule 42. Warns about the futility of making grand preparations for life, as plans may fail and circumstances may change. It is emphasized that life is too short and that achievements may come too late to be fully enjoyed. Rule 43 emphasizes that true wealth lies in personality and what one is internally, rather than in material possessions. Rule 44 discusses the relationship between pain and boredom and how spirit and joy can act as protection against them. It is mentioned that no life is completely free from pain or boredom, and that it is a favor of destiny to be more exposed to pain, where one is better equipped to handle it. Rule 45 addresses the difference between difficult and easygoing people, according to Plato. It discusses how sensitivity to pleasant and unpleasant impressions varies among individuals, suggesting that the difference may be related to nerve tension and the state of the digestive system. The concept of suicide is explored in relation to this sensitivity, noting that both bodily disorders and misfortunes can be motives for suicide. Additionally, the difference between the suicide of a sick person due to their extreme sensitivity and that of a healthy person due to significant misfortune is analyzed. The rule concludes by discussing how happiness and personal fulfillment depend largely on one's individuality and not just external circumstances. Rule 46 quotes Aristotle, who defines the philosophical life as the happiest. Rule 47 highlights the importance of friendship and how this relationship requires reciprocity and mutual commitment. Rule 48 suggests that happiness is found in self-sufficiency and quotes Aristotle to support this idea. Rule 49 defines a happy existence as one that is considered preferable to non-existence after mature reflection, raising the question of whether human life can fit into this concept. Finally, Rule 50 explores the nature of reality and the importance of individuality in the pursuit of happiness, emphasizing that our own personality significantly influences our perception of reality and our happiness.